You gonna try to top that?
No.
I'm done. I'm leaving.
Sorry, that's why we put you second.
That was great.
Now we're going to zoom in on one social studies curriculum area, which is energy savings plans, right?
You could call it that, or it might be science.
Okay, interdisciplinary, right there.
For economics.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the energy savings improvement program that the district has been working on for about 2 years now. Mrs. Chu, I'm sure you're going to be very happy to hear that we are at this point. So let me give you a little bit of background in terms of process. We began about 2 years ago with a high-level energy audits being conducted of all our facilities to look for where those energy savings opportunities may exist. Following those energy audits, there was a validation process that had to really delve into some of those audits by the BPU, and there was a review process there. Following that, once we received clearance, then we began with the issuance of an RFP, a request for proposal for energy savings companies, which would then come in, take a look at those high-level audits, and then really get into the nitty-gritty of what opportunities truly exist in more detail at each of our facilities. The energy savings companies, there were 3 energy savings companies that worked through that process. They developed energy savings plans, and then those plans were submitted to the district, and we underwent a review on a committee basis to assess not only what was being presented as recommendations, but also to determine which of the companies really best met what the objectives were. So at the end of that process, the assessment was formalized in a report. The report was given to the board, and the recommendation was that Honeywell would be the company that we would work with. They scored the highest in all levels. Following that recommendation, and the savings projections that Honeywell had projected, those reports then had to be validated again. There was an energy savings verification that was mandated to be done by a third party. We engaged a third party to go into the details. They validated the information. There were minor revisions that had to be made in terms of costs, very negligible, but in the end, we were given the clearance to proceed. And so we've been working with Honeywell to identify specifically which of those projects are the most worthwhile to pursue. And so that's where we are now. We're now at a point where, having gone through those discussions with Honeywell, with our architect, and with our staff in determining what those pieces would be, and we're now here to report and then give you some of those details. This is Joe.
So since the audits were 2 years ago, and this is why Bernie said because I was frequently asking, where are we, where are we, where are we? Since those audits are so dated, how does that fit into, what's in the plan now? So a lot has happened in the facilities in the 2 years.
Those initial audits were very high level, and so what we're really looking at then are the details that Honeywell in this instance came up with, which is really more recent information.
And not necessarily based on the original audits?
No, correct,
Okay.
correct. That was very high level in terms of identifying that
General
essentially
opportunities.
there's potential. And that potential was then drilled down to come up with the details. So now I'd like to introduce Joe Kosha with Honeywell to go over some of the initial aspects of this report, and then I'll pick it up toward the end. So. Well, how about I can do that?
Yeah, good. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for selecting Honeywell as your energy services partner, because we've worked together. And to answer your question, the local government energy audit that was done, I think it might have been beyond 2 years ago with Cloud Harbor, is really just a way for school districts to decide if in fact there is a potential energy savings improvement program available. Once you select your partner, because we're going to guarantee the savings, we dig into quite a bit of detail that goes beyond the local government energy audit. And that was free. And that was something that, since we're going to be responsible for the savings, it's important that we identify the most recent data. So that's where we're at. So just as a refresher, what we want to talk about is the program itself was developed primarily for school districts, municipalities, county government, to find a way to upgrade their infrastructure without burdening the taxpayers anymore. So what it does is it allows you, and go to the next slide. Simple graphics. It allows you to take the money that you're already spending either with the utility company on repairs and maintenance, use that money and restructure it into new equipment, and have the savings themselves pay for the project itself. And so your district is kind of ahead of its game, ahead of its time. You've done quite a bit of work in this district. And so what we focused on with the solutions that we've identified, go ahead, Brian. It's a little small, but what we focused on, the majority of the projects that we've identified really affect the classroom environment, help improve the learning environment as a whole. So if you take a look at some of the highlights in what we've identified, there's a district-wide building management system involved. Now, some of these projects also help, obviously, operational efficiency, but it's a way to reduce energy savings as well as keep temperature levels where they need to be within a specific classroom. Part of this project is to integrate, right now you have a mishmash of different types of systems in all the buildings. One of the solutions here is to integrate and give Jerry and your facilities team the ability to control and see those buildings remotely, act quicker, respond to environmental issues that are maybe out of order, and so on. Part of that solution, additionally, is that we're getting involved in indoor air quality solutions pretty much for every classroom space, any place that there are going to be children. We're going to be monitoring for VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds. There's also part of this solution is to do what they call demand control management. Demand control management is usually done in big spaces, something that an auditorium, a gymnasium. So as more people come into the room, the system knows to provide more fresh air. And then to save energy, as people leave the room and the CO2 levels drop, you can cut back on the energy usage. And so it's pretty much a key process or a key feature. Additionally, we're going to seal the buildings up. The buildings have drafts. Everyone has them in their home, and it's not just windows and doors. Typically, it's where the cinder block meets the brick, meets the steel in a building. There's so much air leakage around the buildings. We're going to seal the buildings up a little bit more. And the control system itself is going to monitor the environment of the classroom so that the mechanical systems have the ability to bring in fresh air as they need it. We've also included, as part of this project, approximately 1.9 megawatts of solar on 5 of your buildings. And we're also going to be tying in the exterior lighting throughout the district. And if we take a look at just the last page, when I say environmental, a lot of times school districts do these projects that improve efficiency, but they may not necessarily affect the environment. But if you take a look at what we've identified here, LED lighting, classroom environment, and efficiency. These stratification fans, that is a way of distributing the heat better in gymnasiums as you go forward. So that's environmental as well, and it brings the heat down from the ceiling in the wintertime so that the system doesn't run as much. Lighting controls, motor replacements is strictly efficiency. But the next several items, BMS Enhancement, and sorry for the nomenclature there in terms of Niagara platform, but that's the integration platform. Non-connected components. Right now you have hundreds and hundreds of exhaust fans throughout the district that aren't connected to anything, and they pretty much run. And so what we want to do is have the ability to shut them off, and so we're bringing that in. additional air quality monitoring, demand control, ventilation, building envelope, and some efficiency items such as transformers. They're old. There's a much higher level of efficiencies right now with the transformers. And the solar is sized. You don't want to size your solar so it's more than your usage. So the solar is sized to absorb good portions of the district, at least those 5 buildings. And those 5 buildings were chosen primarily based on the area of roof and the conditions of the roof and so on, and what can be produced in those. And currently, we're probably looking, you're paying between 10 and 12 cents per kilowatt hour, or 12 and 13 cents per kilowatt hour, varies throughout the district between supply and distribution. We're getting rates on solar projects somewhere around 5 cents. So that immediate reduction in cost, let alone usage, is going to have a significant impact on the district. And with that, the numbers, I'm going to let Bernie talk about.
So just to point out on the solar, which Joe mentioned, the facilities that would receive solar would be Central, Churchill, Lawrence Brook, Memorial, and the Support Operations Facility. Churchill is contingent upon a new roof, of course, and we know Churchill is in need of that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So let's look at the numbers. So the value of the project is about $8.9 million. The funds for the project, as well as the professional services and so forth, would be done through a refinancing bond. That is one of the items on the agenda tonight. The refunding bond would be a term repayment of 15 years. The bond would be paid for by the energy savings. So basically, it's a wash. It's a wash in the budget. The overall projected energy savings over those 15 years would be over $13.6 million. The projected net cash flow over the term, and that's the energy savings less the repayment on the bonds, would be 2.1, almost $2.2 million. That $2.2 million we're proposing would then be used to offset the roof replacement costs at Churchill and/or the HVAC costs to introduce air conditioning to Churchill. That's part of a financing plan that we've been working on.
It's not really a wash, it's a net positive cash
It's
flow.
a net positive.
Okay, so that's not a wash, that's a
That-
money maker.
It's a net positive
Okay.
money maker there.
Okay, we should be clear
That
about that.
also does not include the projected rebates, New Jersey rebates and incentives, which are over another $1 million. That's an estimate, and we've not even earmarked that at this point because it's show me the money first, then we'll deal
Are all
with.
those incentives still in place for
Yes.
solar?
Yep.
'Cause a
It's
lot of
not-
times
it's
not
not-
just
it-
solar.
These
Yeah,
are other
that's not solar.
incentives.
Yeah,
They're
that's
not
right.
necessarily solar
Okay.
incentives,
On the
there are
energy
other
efficiency.
incentives that will come
Okay.
our way.
Bernie, go back,
Solar incentives are changing. slightly,
Right.
but
Right.
go back for a minute to the 2.2 million that could be used to offset
Right.
roof at Churchill or HVAC at Churchill. What year is that?
That is throughout the term. So there will be divide that amount by 15 years. So that amount, which comes out to roughly about $124,000 a year, will be split. So imagine that going toward the payment annually for the roof and/or the air conditioning.
Because we'd have those set up under annual, in a similar term, 15 years.
Right.
So those will be,
Paid for, it's, yeah.
They would be
okay.
financed
And
as
that will
well.
be used to pay off.
To be clear, give or take. There'd be a little swing there, but
Yeah.
the
Just
bulk of
trying to
it.
get my handle around all these will be used to offset this
Right.
and that.
'Cause
So we
that-
would,
that
we
would-
would, we would have to get, we would be financing, as we have done. We've done agreements with the township, for example, for financing.
Right.
It's built into our budget. We're not looking at expanding the debt.
So at the end of the day, at the end of the 15-year period, we'll have realized, hopefully, this profit net of 2.2 million, which will have been used for some very needed capital improvements.
Another way to look at it is our investment over,
Trying to get my hand
over
on it.
15 years is 8.8. we will get over 15 years 13.6. So that 13.6 divided by 15 is whatever number that is. With that 13.6 divided by
Right.
15, we will pay the cost of this project
Right.
plus air conditioning and roof.
Okay, thank you.
So that, I mean, that's really.
And that 13.6 comes out to about roughly $800,000 a
And
year.
that would be what we would be financing anyway for 15 years of the township.
Now, that $2.2 million in net savings, net cash flow, not savings, but actual cash,
Right.
positive cash flow, that right now is based off of a 4% bonding level. Bonding rates, once we go out on the market, the way the rates are right now, it's gonna be less than that. So if we're less than that on the bonding rates, that number's gonna increase.
Yeah, we have less of a debt less interest.
It's a
A
pretty
good chance
chance.
now.
Very good.
It's a good chance.
Decent chance.
Very good.
Won't be, shouldn't be higher. So, I mean, the numbers sound like they work.
The numbers work. So,
And Mr. Giuliano, would you mind mentioning about the roof, the Churchill roof, so the board knows? You're actively working on a design for the
yes.
roof at Churchill.
So we've been working, the architect has been working on the designs and the specifications for the roof replacement at Churchill, as well as the HVAC systems at Churchill. Now, to put in perspective, this $2.2 million versus what those projected costs are right now, the roof is projected to be about $7 million, and introducing HVAC and completely upgrading the systems at Churchill is about $8 million.
On top of or altogether?
7 plus 8.
Plus 8.
So you're talking about $15 million for those two projects. They are needed projects. We know that. And it makes the most sense, we've been having conversations about how to go ahead and do this. It makes the most sense to package this as one package. One contractor, one package for roof and air conditioning. Both of those things need to be coordinated. We're talking about installing rooftop units, and it's an issue of, well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Does the roof get done? Does the air conditioning get done? We hire a contractor through the bid process. They're responsible for all the coordination. So we're really looking at how are we financing this to make this happen? So that, and because ideally, we would like to be able to kick this off for the summer, and we'd be looking at about a 2-year project.
And so this 2.1 or 2.2 million is a contribution toward that 15?
Correct.
So we still would be on the hook for 13,
Correct.
just
Correct.
to be clear. It's not a free.
It doesn't cover it all, yeah.
Right.
But covered under the way that we typically finance our projects.
Yeah.
Right.
Without having to go.
That's correct.
And go ask the
Right.
public for additional money.
That is correct.
Right.
We have to do it. I mean, these roofs, we've had a
needed,
few
right.
problems.
And
It's needed.
these, obviously, these two projects, since they are priorities, that would mean that we would have other projects in the hopper that would not rise to that level of priority, because these are going to consume the greatest amount of resource.
How did we pick the other buildings for this,
The other buildings.
For solar?
for solar? How do we pick Central and
That
Memorial?
was based on the roof. So we've got the newest roofs. So the newest roofs and area of, rooftop space is what went into determining which buildings really made sense to introduce the solar. So we've got buildings, for example, that are gonna need new roofs. We've got a couple of buildings that will be in the hopper. They're in the hopper now for design. Chittick and Irwin, they wouldn't be viable facilities at this time because the roofs are gonna have to be replaced.
Memorial has solar.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't?
No.
No, solar.
None of our buildings have solar at this time.
Yeah, nobody.
Memorial was designed to accommodate solar. And so was support ops.
Forward thinking. Just couldn't get over the finish line.
Ran out of money.
Right. Thanks.
So this $9 million of opportunity that was identified, was anything left on the table that's cost-effective, or is this maxing out all the cost-effective
This
opportunity?
is taking pretty much everything that we would like to take on. Yeah, there really wasn't anything.
They were the goals. There were some there's some minor things there, like computer power management and things like that. But in conversation with the district, priorities how this was determined, in terms of what the school district wanted to accomplish.
Well, so I guess my question is there more energy savings opportunity that was not done?
Very minimal,
Okay.
very minimal.
And in, I think we were at, I was at Sustainable Jersey at the school board's conference and just hearing some of the other school districts talk about this. They come in, they do it, and then I think it's like 3 years later, 5 years later, you come back for another round because as time passes, something that was not cost-effective at the time, 3 years later, 5 years later.
The
So
best
when do
thing-
you think is the next cycle?
Sure, so the best example of that, and I think the reason you're hearing that is that this law was enacted in 2009, and we did some school districts, Bridgewater, North Hunterdon, Phillipsburg, Robbinsville, we did them prior to LED lighting technology.
So, yeah.
And the LED lighting technology
That's-
is literally taking, we went from what they call T12 lamps that were burning
Huge.
34, 38 watts.
Huge savings.
Down to T8s burning 32 watts. Now we're going from 32 watts down to 10.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
So are we going to be LED throughout after this?
Yes, throughout your district. So that's, that and the solar, along with the building management system, are the key drivers to pay for monitoring the classroom environment. So monitoring the classroom environment doesn't get you any savings, but it's what you do.
So to your question, were there some other opportunities? And there were, and some of these things, like the environmental monitoring, is not a cost savings piece, but with things that we've just experienced.
I think that's great that we're able
You
to
know,
get
and
the
we were-
environmental
we-
monitoring.
Before
That's-
any of these
that's
issues
great.
came up over the last several months, we were already talking about that and saying, that's what
Yeah.
we need to do.
Right.
We need to monitor what are the CO2 levels, what are the VOCs.
And this is something we should have had to do anyway, and this
Absolutely.
will
So
pay
this
for
is
it.
going to help
That's
us
great.
get there. It's going to get us into a central monitoring, so we're able to see what the conditions, what are the environmental conditions in our facilities, and be able to allow us to be proactive rather than reactive. So that's a really important piece for us.
So another important element is once you get all this stuff in, is to continue to manage it the way it was designed. So your staff will have a central monitoring system, and that's going to be something that you'll all be trained on, but keeping up with it and running it the way it's designed to run is a key to achieving those savings. Now, it's a guaranteed energy savings program, so you're going to be all over these guys to make sure they're doing it.
Pretty much.
Now, we'll be all over them.
Or
We're gonna
each
be-
other.
Yeah, but I
Well-
think the point is that we're gonna be monitoring, and we're basically
You're
gonna say, hey,
watching.
you can't change this parameter. If you change
Right.
that parameter.
So what
you're
happens
safe.
sometimes is you put stuff in, and the building operators will take it and just lock stuff in place and kind of override controls, and then you lose all your energy.
And that is
savings.
an issue that we've had, quite honestly,
Yeah.
where, you know, the old building management system that we've had has had so many overrides.
Yeah.
To try to accommodate, you know, and tweak. And you can't operate a system like we have in this district with all of the facilities that we have and just customize room to room to room. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
One last question. When will this be done?
Depends on who's vote tonight.
So your kickoff is tonight. So you're voting on a variety of items this evening. Hopefully, you'll be voting in the affirmative for contracts with Honeywell and with the architect, and to proceed with the bonding necessary. This will be the first reading on bonding. The meeting on December 20th will then be a public hearing on the bonding and the final reading, and then that will be the kickoff for us to go to sale. So we are anticipating we'd probably be closing probably late January on a bond sale. And then once that's in place, then we'll be kicking off with Honeywell.
Right, so one thing to keep in mind, under this law, we're obligated to publicly bid all the trades. So we're gonna be preparing bid documents, and we're gonna get them ready. And, you know, Barney and I have already started to talk about this a little bit, about getting them done quicker rather than later. So that we can potentially, if January, go to bid April. Go to bid
Quickly as you
April.
can.
And one thing, please keep in mind, we're not dependent upon working only in the summer. We've counted on second shift, we've counted on working, because we just can't get it all done in the summer, it just doesn't make sense. Probably looking at a 12-month installation cycle, somewhere around there.
Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sorry I
you.
wasn't exciting as the social studies.
It was pretty exciting.
I'll tell you what, if I had teachers like them, what I was doing.
I think LED lighting's pretty exciting myself. but-
It
I agree
is,
with
it
you.
is.
Yeah, and, you know, I want to make a comment that the support ops building that this board authorized, you know, the building that you acquired and that you completely gutted and remodeled for support ops, that was ahead of its time, really, because that's completely LED lit.
And if anybody here has not seen that building, Dr. Valesky should set up a.
Absolutely.
It is
Yeah.
really,
Anybody that wants to go visit.
something to see.
It really is a nice facility,
yeah,
so
you should see that.
very efficient.